Why does Donald Trump continue to attack the Ukrainian president, and what is the latest blackmail that Russian dictator Putin is using? This and other topics we will discuss right now. My name is Irina Uzlova, and today with us is Yuri Rashkin, host of YouTube channel Rashkin Report and local elected official in Wisconsin. Yuri, hello, glad to see you. Thank you for joining us.
It's my pleasure, Irina. I'm very glad to join you every time. And I got to say, having been born back in the Soviet Union, I had no idea that I was going to be back in the USSR while living in the US. Crazy.
Why do you think so? Maybe it's only a new period and no more?
Exactly. This could be, it could be just a dream. Maybe I will wake up at any minute and I will be back in the America that was. But it is America that we live in. And I think it's really important to acknowledge that we are a very divided country. And we have people who feel very strongly about Donald Trump both ways. And if they like him, then whatever he says, whatever he does, doesn't seem to concern them too much. And it's unfortunate, but it is very interesting to see what is happening right now about the tragedy that is unfolding about our standing in the world stage. Because yes, on one hand, there is a catastrophe after catastrophe from Vice President Vance speaking at NATO gathering in Munich, not NATO, but the Munich Security Conference and NATO too. So all of those things, yes, it is terrible and dreadful, but at the same time, perhaps the people in Ukraine are starting to, and Russian-speaking people, even more interestingly, are starting to really become aware of the fact that they've been disinformed. That they've been misinformed and disinformed by several people for quite a long time now, that Donald Trump likes Ukraine, that Donald Trump is going to do good things to Ukraine. And these speakers have been in Ukrainian media space promoting this idea, saying Joe Biden is not giving enough help. Well, okay, we can all agree with that one. And therefore, Donald Trump is the solution. And this idea of therefore Donald Trump is the solution was very appealing to a lot of people because they wanted a solution. And now we have Donald Trump, who is very clearly states that Ukraine started the war, that it's President Zelensky who is dictator, and on. Things that are impossible, I think, for Ukrainians to say, well, maybe he means something different. You know, I like the people who are grasping at straws of saying something like, oh, he's being really friendly with Putin because he wants to sneak up on him, or I'm thinking what, to choke him in the middle of the night. What are we talking about here? So people are waking up, and people are waking up in Ukraine. And it's a terrible awakening, because to wake up and realize that you have no support from the United States, it's dreadful. And my support and solidarity and thoughts and prayers are with people of Ukraine. And I feel like we in the United States have to do more. Much more. But we have to call our representatives, as we do now, and demand that they provide aid to Ukraine and those things. But at the same time, we woke up in the United States also realizing that people that may have been voted for lower prices on eggs got a lot more than they bargained for, because Project 2025, I think, says very little about eggs. Price on eggs, but it says a lot about other things that we are now seeing kind of manifest themselves. And so on one hand, it's difficult to see what is going on in Ukraine. And I think it's really important that I see in social media, there's a campaign, perfectly spontaneous, to show support for Ukraine. I stand with Ukraine. And it's important that people show this as a sign of conscience, as a sign of having a moral underpinning, that they support Ukraine, that even at this moment when we see that our government may have taken a very different position on this altogether and decided that aggression aggression is not aggression and Putin is not so bad, in fact, Putin is pretty great, then there's a lot of people in this country who don't feel this way. Besides, this is just a really, really bad politics, because popularity of Russia in the United States isn't that high. As one poll showed, like over the years, over the last few years, something happened, and the popularity of Russia in America is down at about 8% right now. Now, it's possible that with Donald Trump explaining to his followers that Russia is pretty great and we're making America great again, that maybe popularity of Russia will increase from 8% to who knows what. But it's never going to be particularly popular because people see that Russia is ruled by a dictator. We don't want to be like Russia. And for decades, United States was, you can say brainwashing, you can say educating, whatever, but it was a manifested truth that Russia is a threat, that NATO exists to protect, all these countries, allies from Russia. That was really made clear to a lot of people for a very long time. And now to find ourselves in a position where actually it's Russia that's pretty great and it's Ukraine that started this war, it's causing just a head spin in America. And I think nothing shows us, again, as with more clarity, what is the right thing to do and the impact of what is happening as, first of all, what we do outside of the United States, where our USAID impact is so great. But in Ukraine, where we can say, some people can wait until something happens, they can be okay with renaming Gulf of Mexico into Gulf of America, and then who cares, life goes on. But Ukraine can't do that. And I think that it's just really important, and I think it's a clarion call to all of us to remember that there is this really important, and the thing is it's not just the right thing to do, but if we think about this and we think about the kinds of people that we now have running the country, who there's just information, I think, published on Trump's chief of staff that she was accused of being a Russian asset back in 2018 or 2019. There's just a variety of people that we're dealing with who have very good long-term standing relationship with Putin that has been very clear in Russia, and through different things. And who is fighting Putin in Russia? Oh, that's right, Ukraine. So I think that in that context, we also need to think about Ukraine as standing up for all of us once again. Ukraine is at the forefront of civilization, because if Russia goes down, I'm hoping that no amounts of what used to be, when the Soviet Union collapsed and George Bush, the elder, sent as a humanitarian aid to a country that I was just fortunate enough to leave a few years even earlier than that. But right after collapse of Soviet Union, there were these legs of Bush, the drumsticks, chicken drumsticks that kind Americans have sent. In this situation, it's not even clear where we'll be sending our the legs of anybody, the drumsticks. Are we going to be sending them to Russia? Are we going to be sending them to North Korea? I think that Americans have a lot of really awakening and reevaluating of doing sort of consequences. But I believe also in American people as well. And I feel that we can overcome this, but we have never been tested so much. And as was put out, as was said very eloquently by Heather Cox Richardson, we live in this world thinking that we're somehow protected against catastrophes, that somehow things that are so horrible just can't occur anymore. Yes, they can. And it's our responsibility to wake up and acknowledge these things so we can do something about them together.
Some joke that Trump wants to make Russia great again, and the joke that Trump will supply weapons to Russia seems like an exaggeration only now. But from other side, today here in his new interview with CBS News White House correspondent Jennifer Jacobs, Trump said that yes, it is Russia that is responsible for the war against Ukraine. Russia attacked, but they had no reason to attack told Donald Trump. This war should never have happened. He said that I'm not trying to make Putin nicer or better. I'm just telling you the fact that there should have been no war. And Trump believes that Putin wants to make an agreement. Also, Trump mentioned that Zelensky is not important to meet as part of the peace deal. What these controversial statements, what do they mean for us now?
I think for Ukraine, and I see this in comments in my channel, Rashkin Report. There's Rashkin Report in English. There's Rashkin Report in Russian. And Rashkin Report in Russian, there's a lot of viewers in Ukraine who are very interested and curious about what's going on in the United States. And they are now leaving comments like, hey, wait a minute. I wonder if Donald Trump is working with President Putin. Well, not president, not so polite, but like, I wonder if they're working together. And people will say, I've done some research on the internet. I asked artificial intelligence. It gave me some proof and evidence. And now I really wonder, maybe somebody should do something about this. And I think about these comments and I go, good morning, welcome, yes, join the party, haha. Because people like Yuri Rashkin have been writing about this for a long, long time. And Yuri Shvets, who've been speaking about this and quite outspoken. The book American Compromise is another. There is evidence. It's the same thing that I knew in Soviet Union growing up, that there was interest in Soviet Union, but there was no supply. There was no information. Out here in America, we have lots of information. We just have to pay attention. Similarly, in Ukraine, they also have a lot of access to a lot of information, but people chose to believe the best about America. What an awful thing to do. They believed that person running for president of the United States is going to do something good for them because they are in an unjust battle against evil. And they could not imagine, they could not fathom that America, of which they've heard so much about and believed in, turned out to be quite different. And that's what is the outcome of what Yuri Rashkin and others have been speaking about. Donald Trump is he has a long-standing good relationship with Vladimir Putin. It's been very clear for many years. There's evidence, and he never hid it. In fact, he's never been able to say a bad thing about Vladimir Putin. And according to Yuri Rashkin, when you're not able to, in that system of, because Yuri Rashkin is like the preeminent historian of Russian security services, KGB, FSB, all of those things. And he says, according to the rules there, you cannot say bad things about the person who is your curator, your handler. And we've never heard Donald Trump say a bad thing about Vladimir Putin. But that's just what specialists say. I mean, who am I? I just read books. And I think Americans are all of a sudden also are waking up. And this is amazing. I watched this commentator, vlogger, Rick Wilson, who is very, I have a lot of respect for him, who said that, check this out, Donald Trump looks at Putin like a fat kid looking at cake. This is just insane. This is insane is my addition to this, but I think Mr. Wilson was quite outraged and quite rightfully so. Our closeness and proximity of American president to Russian president is almost Simpson-esque, gratuitous in its insanity. And yet it is real life, and we see President of the United States declaring that immediately, all of these things have to end and everyone has to make peace with Russia. And you know what that tells me? That tells me that Russia is in pretty sad shape. And by Russia, I mean Vladimir Putin and his army and his people, and all of that aggregate is in pretty sad shape because for the last 3 years, they've been battered like they were not prepared for at all. Because heroic Ukrainians have been standing up to Russia with American weapons for 3 years, dying and killing and defending their land like we cannot imagine. And do you know what that does to, what did Vietnam War do to the United United States. It did not, I think the 70s after that were known as a morass and a difficult time. And that's United States. That's not a barbaric Russian regime, which was hollowed out also by Afghanistan war. And that took them, that was part of the reason for collapse of Soviet Union, is their loss in Afghanistan when they chose to withdraw because they realized they could not afford it. In this case, they maybe are in a position of literally acting like winners in a war that they are very close to losing. And I think this is, again, why it's so important to support Ukraine. And I think Europe is standing in front of a very difficult but very clear decision and choice. Either it does the Russian world thing where everyone is for themselves and everyone thinks that, maybe the predator will, die before they will get to me. Or maybe they will think about such thing as solidarity, which is not just a Polish concept. It's not just worldwide labor movement idea. The idea of solidarity is standing up for each other. And of course, it also proves ignorance and of Ayn Rand worldview. But that's a bigger, different topic that I'm not going to go into right now. I'm just going to say that solidarity and people working together magically, amazingly, it's amazing that more people doing things together because they want to, not because they've been forced into a concentration camp, but because they have a common goal, can produce incredible results, can overcome what one person, one country can do. But of course, the challenge for Europe is no small task, because if we're looking at this new axis of, I don't dare to say what, between China and Russia and United States, it's not going to be easy for Europe. But I think this is where it has to decide if it's going to be with Ukraine and understand that Ukraine and Europe are a partnership, or if it's going to hesitate. And we're going to see this play out right now. And that's another thing that I think is very important to kind of keep our eye on.
Maybe it's one of good things that Europe woke up, so thank you for this detail and for this process, and we will see how European leaders tell about supporting of Ukraine, and they will meet on February 24 when it will be 3 years from the beginning of full-scale war, and they will visit the United States, for example, French President Emmanuel Macron and Polish President and Prime Minister of Great Britain, Keir Starmer, will visit next week Washington, D.C. and will spoke with Donald Trump. Do you believe that these meetings can change something?
I feel like Europe has had a lot of wake-up calls. And it's not clear what does it mean when Europe actually wakes up. Right now, we're seeing that I guess it means a lot of meetings. Okay. I think that there's a lot more that has to happen besides meetings, but meetings is what Europeans do well. That's great. But I think that it's not going to change things to notify Donald Trump. I mean, look, I think that they can do what they can do. But they're also subject to their own term limits, their own elections, their own democratic standards and institutions, and that makes them ultimately vulnerable to somebody who doesn't care about elections. And when it comes to this war of attrition, apparently can outlast a democracy and voters in a democratic state quite easily. Not quite easily. I mean, people in Russia, but who cares about them? So yeah, outlasted, because Russia may be a tiny little economy, but it invests money not into its people and infrastructure and its state. No, it invests money into, enrichment of a small number of people and purchasing of politicians world over. And that can actually be money well spent if you look at without the moral component to this and just the outcome that you're looking to reach, which is amoral behavior. But sometimes people who are so concerned about life and not wanting to pay attention to dirty business of politics, they just don't want to talk and think about those things. But that's what Russia did with their small amount of money, and they invested it very effectively. And so now they're going to have Europe that's disconnected, because one thing that Europe could do is take $300 billion from Russia and give it to Ukraine. But that means, dealing with Hungary, dealing with, I believe, Slovakia, and that's where Europe is going to have to decide what are they going to do. Because if they're serious, most of them, who are they? What are they going to do about it? This is days. These are moments of huge decisions that are going to really clearly determine the world that we're going to be living in for quite some time.
U.S. President Donald Trump's special representative for Ukraine, Kellogg, who arrived in Kyiv on February 19, reported on broad and positive discussions with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyi. He wrote about this on the X network. He also distributed yesterday's evening video addressed by the Ukrainian president, in which he reports that the meeting with General Kellogg renewed hope for the conclusion of a strong agreement with the United States. A long and intense day with the senior leadership of Ukraine. Extensive and positive discussions with Zelensky, the embattled and courageous leader of a nation at war, and his talented national security team. Yuri, have you renewed hope? And can we say that we see like two teams around Donald Trump? Keith Kellogg, Marco Rubio, for example, by one side, and from another side we see, for example, another person who cannot support Ukraine as much as Rubio and Keith Kellogg.
I think we see the division that goes along the lines of, are they okay? Can Russia tolerate them or not? Because Keith Kellogg clearly came across as too pro-Ukrainian and got sidelined, and so he's not in Saudi Arabia, but instead he's in Kyiv. And things didn't go well there, and he was told that the press conference was off. Because this is a very manual, it seems like a very manual control administration. In Russia, this is a very common practice. Manual control is what they call what Putin does. But when we see Secretary of State come out after a press conference and looking straight after, like this, it's not a press conference to answer questions so much as to let somebody who is watching on the other side, one person really, let him know what happened and what, that's for him. That's why it all started with, this is, only President Trump, the only one who can solve this problem. He's the only one. So that's, and then Donald Trump was really not even happy with that performance. And he had to clearly clean up the mess because Secretary Rubio was far too slow about making peace with Russia. And President Trump was clearly going, come on, let's speed things up here. Everything is great. We're going to be meeting with Putin very soon. Come on. And that's Saudi Arabia. But at the same time, Keith Kellogg, I got to say that as somebody who spent a long time in the United States, I was familiar with Kellogg as a cereal, breakfast cereal, cornflakes, not Lieutenant General. Who is this person? Before he came up with this plan, we really didn't hear about him. Maybe he was on Fox News. I'm not sure. But his plan turned out to serve a purpose because it gave a kind of a permission structure or a little bridge to get away from the idea that the United States is an ally of Ukraine, and it put the United States in a position that it's a referee between Russia and Ukraine, which already looks strange and it wasn't really workable, which is why this plan wasn't really logical before. But now it seems like Keith Kellogg's mission may have even shifted, because as of February, he added an important feature to his plan, I guess that wasn't there before, that President Zelensky, that the Ukraine immediately needs to have elections. That's really, really important part of his, his agenda, which was not a part of his plan prior to, which tells me that it's not so much plan of Kellogg as it is, as he is another person out there pushing, interests of the administration, which in addition includes getting hold of Ukraine's rare minerals. And according to some of the information that seems to be seeping out, that it may not even be an agreement between the United States government, but it could be to benefit certain corporations that would be doing the development of those minerals. So how is this connected to ending war? Unclear. I think it creates kind of a fog of war, and it creates a generally fairly demoralizing situation where Putin and Trump are hoping that Ukrainians are just going to give up. Because what Donald Trump doesn't seem to really want to do is do things, with his own hands. He would like to have somebody else do the work. And so it would be really handy if Ukrainians could just surrender to Putin, and then Donald Trump could say, look, there is peace. There's no more war. Peace, peace, peace. And now, since there's no more war, Ukraine, whatever, he can make peace with Vladimir Putin. Because the problem is that Ukraine seems to be like a bone in the throat of these two people, I'm using word loosely, who are trying to, improve their relations. Because however Donald Trump is looking at Putin, clearly Ukraine is getting in the way. And I think Ukraine this way ends up actually playing, once again, a very important role in today's world, because it is also slowing down the embrace between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin. But on thinking about this a little further, how much longer is it going to be from the position of we are ally of Ukraine to we are now going to be sending weapons? I hope we do not send weapons to Russia. I hope that this is a point where American voters, taxpayers, somebody is going to say, no, that's too much. But I guess this administration is moving forward with its view of reshaping the world as aggressively and fast as it can. And it's going to be, until people rise up, it's not going to be stopped. Right now, we're seeing that there's a very boisterous response at town halls. I saw a video of a town hall in Georgia, state of Georgia, where people were yelling because they said we did not elect a king. So yelling at a congressman, representative, who was attending a town hall with his constituents, and they were explaining to him loudly and boisterously that no, they do not want a king, and they are very upset about it. That's not Ukraine. That's not any particular, that's a bigger issue, really. So I think the United States has got its handful, and it's important to realize that Ukraine is really an important part of the solution to the big problem that we're all facing.
Until we are talking, I get the information that Trump will come to Moscow for the May 9th celebration and meet with Putin there, writes the French magazine Le Point, according to their own sources. What victory will Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump celebrate on May 9, 2025? Not so much the allies of 1945, but their common agreement in the peace talks on Ukraine, which, according to the Kellogg plan, will end on May 9. If everything goes well for them and their common plan, then May 9, 2025 will be the day of their triumph, the triumph of Putin, first of all, this media rights. If this moments or this plan realizes, if this event happens, it will be a complete disgrace and fall of Trump and America as a whole.
I think that's exactly as you said, as a whole, yes. It's important for those people that think that Donald Trump can be hurt by Vladimir Putin. He can't. Everything that Vladimir Putin does and says is great by Donald Trump's measurement. Well, I mean, if nothing else, look at what Putin has accomplished. He's got complete domination of his country, probably the richest man in the world. So there's reasons to emulate him. And if you take out any moral component to this whatsoever, and you look at the just power, it's sheer power, then, Putin obviously offers some lessons for today's Machiavelli of how to run a terrorist state. But it's really just mind-boggling that American president would go to Russia after all of this, after the last 3 years, and completely disregard everything and stand next to Putin, perhaps on top of mausoleum, like a member of Politburo. When I was growing up in Moscow and looking at parades, because it was the coolest thing in Russia to watch military parade. Look at all those weapons on Red Square. I mean, that's pretty cool stuff. And you see all those old guys on Mausoleum, saw all those old guys on Mausoleum and their funny hats. You know, that could be American president now. Next to Chinese president. On one hand, it's crazy. And on the other hand, I think it's crazy because it can't last. I think that this incredible meeting of just stars in the universe, where we have three major global superpowers that are all having an extreme dictatorial moment, that they're seeing their own, that they're not even fighting with each other because they're saying, hey, we are all together against all of these democracies. We clearly understand that we are together against them. It's us against them. When you would expect them to get into a war over something, and they've historically been. So there is no tension that there used to be in the world. So maybe we will arrive at world peace. And President Trump will get his Nobel Peace Prize. But, you know, there could be some nuances to the situation.
Terrified things in all meanings of that word. Amazing. Yuri, thank you so much for our today's conversation, for your opinion, your thoughts, and for your time. See you next week.
See you next week.
Take care. Yuri Rashkin, host of YouTube Rashkin Report, was with me, Irina Uzlova. Thank you guys for having us. Thank you so much. Take care.